Well, now that pesky 2024 is behind us, finally, we can focus on the march to greatness that lies ahead. And in our featured story today, front and center in that effort, comes a CNN report about our venerable Chief Justice John Roberts just days ahead of the January 20th inauguration of Donald John Trump. Roberts has issued a stern warning to all within earshot. But what will that mean for the incoming president? Well, as you're about to learn, Roberts is threatening to throw some potential legal haymakers at anyone who dares defy the Supreme Court's supreme ruling. Well, because as we know, these distinguished folks have proved to be supreme people of supreme character.
We can lead by example to live a life of morals and manners. People of character can help to inculcate virtue by exhibiting moral strength to do what is right despite frustration, despite temptation.
The policy that I followed during all my years on the bench, which is to bend over backwards to make sure that I didn't do anything that came close to violating the code of conduct or give anybody the impression that I was doing anything that was improper.
At that very basic minor level, these people who tell you what to do, who rule on your rights, Justice Alito telling you you can't have a right to certain health care and abortion decisions, will then go out with a straight face and talk about their standards and what they do. It is hypocrisy of the highest order, and it has put a cloud over the Supreme Court.
And on a final issue of concern inside the court, I want to assure people that I am committed to making certain that we as a court adhere to the highest standards of conduct.
As you'll see, some are suggesting the motivation behind Roberts' year-end report may be directed at factions like Trump and Vance, especially given J.D. Vance's past quotes about posing challenges to the Supreme Court.
I think that what Trump should do, like if I was giving him one piece of advice, fire every single mid-level bureaucrat, every civil servant in the administrative state, replace them with our people. And when the courts, because you will get taken to court, and then when the courts stop you, stand before the country like Andrew Jackson did and say the Chief Justice has made his ruling, now let him enforce it. Because this is, I think, a constitutional level crisis.
Now let's dig into today's stern warning from Chief Justice John Roberts about his coming expectations of strict adherence to Supreme Court dictates. Supreme Court Chief Justice John Roberts slammed what he described as dangerous talk by some officials about ignoring federal court rulings, using an annual report weeks before President-elect Donald Trump takes office to stress the importance of an independent judiciary. Officials from across the political spectrum have raised the specter of open disregard for federal court rulings, Roberts wrote in the report released by the Supreme Court on Tuesday. These dangerous suggestions, however sporadic, must be soundly rejected. The Chief Justice didn't detail which officials he had in mind. Both Republicans and Democrats have hinted at ignoring court rulings in recent years. Still, Roberts' year-end message landed days before the January 20th inauguration of a president who has repeatedly decried the federal judiciary as rigged. Trump's agenda, particularly on immigration, could put the incoming president on a collision course next year with the Supreme Court he has helped to build by naming 3 conservative justices during his first term. Every administration suffers defeats in the court system, sometimes in cases with major ramifications, Roberts wrote. And yet, he added, for the past several decades, both parties have respected court decisions and have headed off the kind of constitutional confrontation that arose during the civil rights era, when some southern states declined court orders to integrate. Roberts, in particular, pointed to decisions by the Eisenhower and Kennedy administrations to enforce school desegregation rulings. In 1957, for instance, President Dwight Eisenhower sent the 101st Airborne Division to Little Rock to integrate its schools after officials sought to defy Supreme Court decisions that found segregated schools unconstitutional. Roberts lamented that public officials, whom he did not name, had regrettably attempted to intimidate judges by suggesting political bias in the judges' adverse rulings without credible bias for such allegations. Those attempts, he warned, are inappropriate and should be vigorously opposed. As in past years, the Chief Justice avoided direct mention of the controversies and challenges brewing within the Supreme Court itself, including lingering questions about ethics, a week-long scandal over controversial flags hoisted at Justice Samuel Alito's properties, and sagging public confidence in the nation's highest court. In a series of interviews before the election, Vice President-elect J.D. Vance raised doubts about his fidelity to Supreme Court decisions. In a 2021 podcast, as New York Times has previously reported, Vance urged Trump to respond to adverse court rulings like Andrew Jackson did and say, "The Chief Justice has made his ruling, now let him enforce it." The likely apocryphal quote came in response to an 1832 decision Jackson opposed that dealt with Native Americans. Trump himself has often blasted federal courts, including the Supreme Court, over adverse decisions. A spokesman for Trump's campaign earlier this week slammed the political weaponization of our justice system in a response to a federal appeals court ruling in New York that upheld a jury's verdict finding that the former president sexually abused writer E. Jean Carroll. Democrats, too, have toyed publicly with declining to enforce court decisions. New York Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez drew criticism last year, suggesting on CNN that the Biden administration ignore a district court decision that would have halted Food and Drug Administration of the abortion pill mifepristone. Supreme Court paused that decision and in June tossed the lawsuit challenging wider access to the drug. Roberts has repeatedly used his year-end report to tout the importance of an independent judiciary and to sound an alarm about threats of violence against judges. 2 years ago, in a similar vein, he stressed that a judicial system cannot and should not live in fear. In this year's report, Roberts added that hostile foreign state actors had accelerated attacks on the judiciary and other branches. In some instances, he said, bots distort judicial decisions using fake or exaggerated narratives to foment discord within our democracy. The report lands at the end of the year in which the conservative 6-3 majority granted former presidents sweeping immunity from criminal prosecution, and on that timeline allowed Trump to avoid a trial on federal charges in 2 cases before the November election. This fall, the court is delving into transgender care bans and a First Amendment challenge to a bipartisan ban on TikTok. The role of the judicial branch, Roberts wrote, is to say what the law is. But he added, judicial independence is undermined unless the other branches are firm in their responsibilities to enforce the court's decrees. Chief Justice, heal thyself. I think the moral and legal authority you claim you may have squandered by eye-rolling away everything from Martha Baumgardner to Harlan Crow. Now in 2025, my resolution is to try to end each report by taking us from the perspective of the rabbit hole and heading up to the moon, because from up there what we see is a bought and paid for Supreme Court and at least one incoming president with lots of cash and prizes to go around. Case closed.